I'm Jim Collison, and live from Gallup Studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on October 26th, 2017. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during this live webcast, we do have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video window there. A great way to answer or to ask your questions during our live webcast. Just log in, bottom left-hand corner, choose the login button, put in your name where it says guest. Well, choose the guest account, put in your name where it says guest, and then hit submit, and you are in. If you're listening to the recorded version and you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or you can use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video and now both streaming and downloadable audio. We call that podcasting. That's what we call that here. Get it available on both on your Android or iPhone, available for you. All the links and everything you need to get access to that's on our coach's blog. Just head out to coaching.gallup.com. Pooja Luthra is our host today. She works as an advanced consultant with Gallup in our Delhi office. And Pooja, always great to have you on Call to Coach. Welcome to Call to Coach.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the India edition of Call to Coach. Our guest for today is Abhishek Joshi, an employee turned entrepreneur and doing some really exciting stuff in the sphere that he's working in right now. Abhishek has over 14 years of experience in OD, talent management, learning and development functions. And before he ventured out into his own startup, so to speak, and I'll get into that in just a second, he was heading L&D with India Mart, did a lot of work in L&D for MNYL, which is Max New York Life. And in his current role as the co-founder and practice head at his startup called Pingo, it's an organization that's focused on experiential learning, behavioral science, and technology to deliver the learning and development and OD solutions. So it's a good amalgamation. I mean, we talk a lot about behavioral science here at Gallup. We talk a lot about experiential learning as well. And then, that the angle of technology is something that, we've all realized is important because of, with everything that's happening. And, we're sitting here right now. Jim's in Omaha, you're in Pune, I'm here. So it's just, one of those things that it's important for technology to bridge that gap and do it more effectively, especially when it comes to learning and development. So always intrigues me to speak with someone about how they're bridging the gap to make sure that technology does not really hamper the learning in any way, rather than how can it augment it. So Abhishek, a very warm welcome. Very excited to have you here. And thank you so much for taking time us out. Yeah.
Thanks, Pooja. Thank you so much.
All right. So before we get into your experience at Pingo and the others, let's just start a little bit about the strengths journey first, and then we'll get into the technology bit, etc. in just a few minutes from now. So let's start with a little bit about your top 5 and your journey as a strengths coach. Why strengths? How did you start, and all of that?
Sure. Thanks, Pooja, and thanks, Jim. So before I talk about it, let me share my top themes. My top themes are achiever, analytical, connectedness, relator, and individualization. So after taking my assessment and going through my report, I was really thrilled to know about what report shared things about me. So I could relate to almost everything. And now let me use my connectedness theme to share my journey with you, that how I started working. I started getting attracted towards Gallup Strengths. So when I read about the report, I realized that a lot of things which are there, which are very, very true. So my achiever talent pushed me to know more about it and to do something tangible. So I completed my coaching certification. When I completed that, my analytical theme, it pushed me to know more, to analyze more about application of Gallup Strength, how in which all different areas it can be applied other than corporate, and dealing with the challenges which people in corporates and organizations face. So I read almost all the publications published by Gallup Press, like strength-based parenting, strength-based selling, teach with your strengths. So I discovered that the strength-based development is a movement. It's not just an intervention, and it has a very limitless scope. So that motivated me and to pursue my journey as a strength coach. And I was not only able to work very closely with the corporates. I was able to work with individuals who are, some of them are not working anywhere, and they are, some of them are housewives, or some of them are students. So this has been really, really interesting for me. Also, from an application and understanding point of view, because of my background, I knew a lot of things about other tools, which are also known as type tools. While they all talk about how similar we are, however, Gallup Strengths talks about how different we are from others and how we can achieve more by being different. So that's something which really, really excited me. It's very simple, visible, and quite consistent. These are three things which I really, really liked about Gallup Strengths. Also, when I used to head learning and development, a lot of business development professionals from learning and development companies used to come and meet me and share their learning and development solutions, specifically one-to-one coaching. So while listening to them, I used to find it difficult at times, or at times, it used to take some time for me to relate about what they are saying and how it will be applied. However, when I met Gallup and when I got to know about Gallup Strengths, I was able to relate it really, really simply. And I thought that if I share this solution with the leaders within my organization, or people who may not know much about psychology, they will be able to relate and understand the application of it in their life. This is something which again I really liked about Gallup Strengths. And also the quality of report. If you look at the report is pretty simple. When I read the report, unlike a lot of other tools, with due respect to all the tools and their design philosophy, I found other tools a bit complicated to understand for a layman. However, the report which comes out of as a result of your assessment is pretty simple, and one can really know more about himself or herself, and then start applying it by understanding it in detail. So that has been my journey, Pooja, so far.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you recap all of these things, and it's something that we live, breathe, and we believe in. But it's nice when it comes from somebody who's had a chance to use it. And I know you've been very receptive about using these things. I think you're absolutely right. Simple, visible, consistent, that's what the tool is. And I think when it comes to applicability, that's something that not only it's intuitive, but a lot of times independent research has told us that StrengthsFinder seems to be one of those where people say that they were able to relate to it and they were able to apply it. So I guess there it sort of substantiates what you just said. So tell me a little bit about your journey as a coach. I mean, if I remember correctly, you became a certified coach once you had already left the corporate world to start your own venture, correct?
Yeah. Correct.
So tell me, how did it sort of fit into it? I mean, I know in the previous avatar, you were mostly learning and development, etc. So when you shifted and you started your own venture, how did the idea of coaching fit in, and how did the idea of strengths fit into the whole scheme of things that you had going?
Yeah, so the idea of coaching is something which I always wanted to do, because after spending a lot of time in learning and development space, I was really fascinated to do coaching. And the next step, a natural progression for me, from a one-to-many facilitator, or someone who can design learning and development roadmap, is to try my hands in doing one-to-one coaching. And I wanted to do this with the help of a framework which is very, very simple, which can be really, really easy for a client to understand. So for example, let's say if I'm going out and explaining something, it should not be really, really complicated. People should be able to relate with that. So that's how I selected Gallup. I said rather other as compared to other philosophies, which I found personally are a bit complicated to explain when it comes to telling someone who doesn't have learning and development or OD background, that how it is going to impact your business outcomes, your organization, and how it can become, it can become a movement in your organization. How it can transform culture of your organization. So I found Gallup pretty simple. It can, one can communicate very simply. One doesn't have to use a lot of jargons to explain what strength-based movement is, and it focuses on very fundamental thing rather than making things complicated. It simply simply talks about questions, about discovering yourself, and how by looking at yourself positively, you can create an impact in your organization. If I look at, I always wanted to work with organization in transforming their culture with respect to their people dimension in the organization. And I found Gallup Strengths as a very, very strong tool, which can build a very commonality in the language that people speak in the organization, and that can also build a very positive and healthy environment. For example, unlike a lot of competency development framework where we are not allowed to share your competencies with others. Gallup Strength encourages you to share your strengths with each other. So this fact itself makes it really, really interesting. And for me, it has helped whenever I went out to meet people while doing new business development or explaining them about benefits of Strength Finder. They've appreciated this fact really, really well.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about the application. You've been talking a lot about applications. So obviously, I'm sensing you've seen some ease and some impact of the application of Strengths Finder. So when we speak to people, a lot of people have done coaching with one-on-one, like you said, students and from people who are working, people in companies who are managers, leaders, sometimes teams. So is there a particular niche that your organization has picked up where you've seen the application of the Strengths Finder fit into, let's say, a larger portion of an OD intervention or a larger piece of the journey that they're on?
Yeah, there are some specific niche areas I would like to talk about. In fact, I presented Gallup Strength Finder as a solution to one of the primary schools, where the founder of the school, he wanted to drive his entire workforce using something which is very, very positive. He wanted to align his entire team with something which is very, very positive, which can help them develop a culture of high engagement and appreciation. So that's what the owner of the organization, founder of the organization, wanted to drive. In this specific play school is something which people think that how Gallup Strength will be able to transform a work culture of a primary school. So there, I started with one-to-one coaching of the founder of the school. And then after doing a couple of sessions, he realizes that it's really, really interesting to know positive things about people and to understand what their strengths are. And if someone can help them in identifying their strengths and someone can help them in applying their strengths in their work life, then what will happen? One, their acceptance about self will increase. And that will translate, particularly if I'm talking about teachers, that will translate in when they are delivering, when they are talking to students, because they will not be guarded. They will enjoy what they are doing in their life, and that will help them transform lives of people, students, whom they are dealing with. So this was a really, really interesting case study. It's a long-term intervention which I did in this primary school, and I'm still continuing with that. And it's really, really nice to see that how all teachers of primary school talk about strength-based development. They talk about their strengths, they share their strengths with each other, and they apply their strengths when they work, when they talk to their students. And also, I also shared with them strength-based teaching, teach with your strengths, right? And how that helps, that I further help them in understanding application of strength-based journey in their teaching role. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, we've also seen a lot of success and a lot of impact when it comes to driving the idea of strengths in institutions. I mean, be it schools or be it higher education, but there is a lot of merit in it. Tell me something. So when you get into something like a school-based thing in which you're, sort of coaching teachers, etc. So is it like a one-on-one thing, or have you managed to sort of make a program of sorts in which you're able to integrate more of what they are doing or the curriculum, etc., with the idea of strengths yet, or it's just a coaching for teachers as of now?
So since I'm doing an OD intervention with them, so it becomes part of an organization development intervention. So it starts with first, understanding the current state, and then after that, doing a workshop, and followed up by one-to-one coaching session. So that's how it works.
Got it. So any other example that sort of comes to mind? So when it comes to the application, I know, we've been talking about certifying other people and all of that. So where is all of that fitting in your application of strengths?
So there's one example which I would like to talk about, and this example is something which I would like to talk about someone who has been impacted deeply in his personal life. And I would always remember this because I received call from their family members, and they said, "Thank you, Abhishek. You have helped us. You have allowed us to discover a new avatar of the person whom I was coaching." So this person is really successful in his corporate life, and he likes to plan everything perfectly and doesn't go without. I had a coaching conversation with him. He talked about his approach and his way of meticulously planning everything very proudly. And then I asked him, what challenges do you face in your life? And he started articulating that, I live under a lot of stress, though I plan perfectly, but it causes me a lot of stress. And of late, my family members, my wife, my kids, they have started complaining about me being under stress and creating a pressure kind of situation at home always. And I think by now people who are watching this live would have guessed it that I'm talking about his theme, one of the themes, discipline. So what was happening, he was living in the basement of discipline. So when I started having a detailed conversation with him, I asked this question to him. I asked him, what happens? I created a situational question. I said, on a Sunday afternoon, you're sitting with you're sitting at your home and you don't have any plan. And someone, your neighbor calls you and says that, hey, I want to come and meet you. What would be your most natural reaction? The person replied that I would say no. I said, why? Because it has not been planned. Then the second question, follow-up question was, okay, imagine that you have decided that you will go out with your family for an outing, and you decided that all of you will leave at 4 o'clock. Now, you are ready at 4 o'clock since you are really planned. Your family members do not get ready. They delay your departure by 15 minutes. What will happen to you? How will you react? What is the most natural reaction usually? I'll get frustrated because I like things to plan. I like planned things. I want things to happen on time. Then after explaining, after having this conversation, I explained him the concept of basement and balcony. And I talked about blind spots, and I talked about how discipline can become a barrier for him, how it can become an impediment for him. So then we started, creating an action plan, and we created an action plan, and he started applying it in his personal life. And as a result, he has started living a more happier life, and he still does a lot of things as per his plan, but the amount of stress has drastically reduced, which allowed him to live a very happy life, and he's enjoying his time more than ever before with his family and at his workplace.
Great. We hear these examples a lot. I mean, I think balconies and basements is always a revelation when you're coaching individuals, because it's very difficult to imagine that something which is a talent can also have a negative manifestation sometimes. So it's
Absolutely.
always an eye opener for a lot of people, and there are aha moments that come with it, and it's always very it's nice for a coach to go through somebody having a personal aha moment. Very empowering in that way. So but tell me, Abhishek, I'm just trying to get a feel of you're an entrepreneur now. You have your own startup. So obviously, there is an element of the business angle of this whole thing, and how it supports you to grow your business as you intended to. So when you look at the strengths movement in the country today, and given the market that you're catering and you're venturing out, etc., what do you think are some of the highlights of how people perceive the idea of strengths, and where is it headed, and what's your take on it given what you have been doing over these past couple of years?
Yeah. So when I talk to people about, so currently I'll tell you about the changes. If you look at the changes which have happened in our environment, in business environment, in technology, information is something which is very easily available to people nowadays, and therefore people learn a lot of things by browsing internet, by visiting YouTube. They all are looking for something different, which can scientifically tell them about themselves, right? And which can scientifically help them achieve something. And also,
Yeah.
rather than an external motivation, people are looking for a long-lasting internal motivation. So when I talk to them, they show appreciation of the fact that this is based on behavioral science, and this is not something. So someone who's not going to come and coach me using only his or her experience. It is backed up by strong behavioral science principles. That's something which people really, really appreciate about. And also, it allows them to do introspection in a very systematic manner. So this is something which people have really, really appreciated about this tool. So again, like I said, one is simple, visible, and consistent. These three things. Second, something backed up by science. It always excites people. So this is the response which I get when I talk to people, whether they sign up for coaching or not. But I have hardly come across anyone who has actually discarded Gallup strength, or who has raised objections which cannot be handled. Yeah.
I think that's a very good point that you raise, and I was just we were going through a report that we've published on the idea of millennials, etc. And one of the things that comes across is that, of course, how technology has sort of taken over their lives in terms of everything is now. But you're right. I mean, that also creates, from an information point of view, a lot of noise. I mean, there is so much material out there, so it's very important to have that sanctity of what is the right thing, what should I go with. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So coming back to what we had discussed when we had started talking about it, the one thing that I personally grappled with, and I'm just talking for myself right here, is that when it comes to research and behavioral inputs and all of those things, coaching, etc., there is a very robust science, etc. But somehow, even today, if you were to ask me how would I like to share that with another person, or in terms of learning and development or coaching, my first instinct is face to face. My first instinct is I would like to be sitting across from you at the table and talking to you about it, because I feel that's where it's most effective and things like that. But now we also know that technology is big, and with costs, etc., people want to avoid traveling and things like that. So what is it that you've sort of I believe you do a lot of work in technology based learning solutions. So what is the new thing there?
So technology, my take has been, and my experience has been, that technology in isolation is not successful when it comes to learning and development space. So when we talk about e-learning solutions, when we talk about solutions which are absolutely technology based, in isolation they are not very successful, and clients do not relate much when you only go and talk about tech-based learning solutions. It has to be blended. So if a coaching session is blended by, so for example, let's say, if you look at a Gallup application, mobile app that we have. So for example, let's say I am doing a face-to-face session with someone. After that, a person wants to do something, and discover something about himself, which is something which may not have discussed during the coaching conversation. Then what happens, that is the time where technology plays a vital role. How you are able to engage your clients after once you have done your coaching session. Empowering and enabling your client to discover more, to achieve more, without you being there physically present all the time. Yeah. So in isolation, it is not very successful. If it is blended, then it can really create a very good impact.
We lost Pooja for just a second, so let me jump in as she kind of resets her sound. She's having trouble hearing you. Abhishek, I'm particularly interested when we think about this idea of learning, and we think about the idea you just said that learning has to be kind of a blended environment. What are you seeing when you see there's learning, but then there's follow-up, and what are you seeing in the follow-up space that's working really well? I think this is an area a lot of our coaches really struggle in, because they get so focused on the very first session, but they realize there has to be sessions afterwards. What's working for you, or what are you seeing that's working?
So one is that for follow-up, first of all, the name it, claim it, aim it philosophy. I try to establish name it, claim it, aim it very, very clearly in the session number one. I typically do 2 to 3 sessions with my coaches. So I try to establish name it, claim it, aim it really, really well in number one session. And that leaves coaches with the thought that the discovery has not stopped here. It is just in the first session, we have just started. So claiming it is something which they will have to do after the session. And to know more about their strengths, they can also use mobile application and also subscribe to YouTube channel and learn more about it. So this is something, so once claiming it so they know that, they realize that claiming is really, really important. I establish it. So when I meet them next time, then what happens, they have questions related to, they want to claim more about their strengths.
Have you found any apps working better than others? As an example, our interns, when we put them together, they love GroupMe, right? And they dig in. Have you found that, in particular, there's any apps that help you stay connected to them, or they stay connected to each other?
So there are mobile learning solutions which allows you to upload content and share with anyone. They're very simple. One can record videos and share with each other. There are apps which have been developed within the organization, which allows people to share their best practices and communicate very freely with each other. So those are the apps which are really, really helpful for people, and people use it because there is no restriction, there is no mandate, and it allows them to talk to each other very, very freely and share about their journey. So these are certain mobile learning solutions which are really, really working well. But again, only mobile learning and e-learning is successful only if it is blended. If it is in isolation, it will not work.
I couldn't agree more. More. Anyway, I think I have a bias, but I couldn't agree more that it needs to be sort of blended. Otherwise, it's just, my relationship with my screen, which is very good. Thank you. So yeah, no, I'm sure that's good to know that, blended thing is probably what we also look at a lot of times. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up the idea of name it, claim it, aim it, etc. Abhishek, I mean, the reason is that, the one thing that we often face, and this is again, biases from people coming across, is that when you look at a report, and you yourself said that's a very simple report, it sort of gives you a flavor of, okay, this is who I am and this is it, a bit like horoscope, okay, I've read it and that's so what.
Absolutely.
But it's very important to lay it down as a journey, that this is literally the starting point and not just, okay, I read it and I can keep it on one side. So I think that often is the recipe for having a very meaningful coaching relationship. It works like that. Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A question that's been in my mind, it's not related, but I'm going to go ahead and ask, and Jim can edit it out if he wants later. Tell me about the name of your company again. Why Inpingo? So
Inpingo means impact.
Okay.
It means impact. And we wanted to create an impact using three things, experiential learning, behavioral science, and technology.
Yeah, read about that.
The three-step process. So experiential learning is like, everything around us is changing. So is the way learning and development space is also changing. The way people learn, it has also been changing now. So we need to acknowledge that and focus more on experiential learning and based on more scientific tools and backed up by technology, so that it can provide an end-to-end solution to an organization, to a learner, rather than just doing something and just leaving it. It will be considered as a good intervention, but the impact will not be measured.
Yeah. So talking about experiential learning, I mean, again, it just crossed my mind as you were talking about it. When you talk about this, the idea of strengths, have you been able to blend that with experiential learning within organizations?
Yeah, Pooja. In fact, a very interesting example that I have, that I have been working with a mountaineer, and now this guy is has achieved quite a lot at a very young age, and he is the youngest Indian who has climbed Mount Everest at the age of 16. He is the youngest in the world who has climbed 5 peaks of 8,000 meters and above by the age of 23. So both of us, when I started, my coaching sessions with them, and I realized that I discovered that this guy has been focusing on his strengths right from his childhood and has been able to achieve so much in his life at such a young age. Then I thought it's a very interesting journey that, though he has not discovered this with the help of a science, but when I coached him, when I discovered his top 5, I realized that he's actually applying it very, very strongly, and he's in balcony in most of the situations. So there, both of us came together, and his conviction about strength-based development also increased as we started talking how he has been able to achieve so far using his strength and how he can achieve more by using his strength. So both of us came together and we created a program called Find Your Everest.
Okay.
And it's an experiential learning program wherein he talks about how he has been able to achieve Everest of his life at such a young age. And I use strength-based philosophy, and I talk about that how all of us, if we focus on strength-based development, can achieve Everest of our life by just discovering doing things what we are really good at. And then he becomes a very clear example in the workshops, and I back it up with the behavioral science and the Gallup philosophy. So it's a blended approach. People get to see people see experience of someone who has achieved quite a lot in their life live in the classroom session using strength-based development, and that helps me build the workshop and drive more towards application orientation.
Yeah. Very clever play of words. I mean, a bit like our peak experience and find your Everest and things like that.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting play of words. Yeah. Jim, do we have any questions from the chat room?
I've got a question for you, Abhishek. We see this all the time in the folks that I go to hire. And how are you learning? So what's the you're a learning master, right? You're in this all the time. But what's working for you individually? How do you approach this, and what's been really helpful and healthy for you in your learning experience?
So I watch all call to coach editions. It gives amazing learning.
I didn't pay you to say that, by the way.
No, absolutely. I'm saying that I've learned quite a lot by learning from others. By when other coaches come and share their experience, it's really, really insightful, and that helps in applying applying things in coaching conversation. Also, it's very, very important to discover various aspects about strength-based development. So I have read all the books, like I was saying, the strength-based parenting, first break all the rules, teach with your strengths. So strength-based selling. So this has actually helped me in establishing this fact and realizing that everyone needs a coach, right? Everybody needs a coach. So that so this is pretty much required. Initially, what happens? New coaches or people who are listening to strength-based development for the first time, they look at conviction of an individual, and conviction comes when you learn, you discover multiple dimensions of strength-based development. So these are certain things which I do. I read quite a lot about strength-based development. I have internalized it. I watch call to coach videos, theme Thursdays, and yeah, this is something which I do. And while going for coaching conversation, so I have surrendered myself completely to the Gallup strength philosophy. I've read all the content shared with us during the coaching course, and I've surrendered, and I've tried to internalize each and everything. If I just before my examination, I remembered all the theme insight cards, everything in the theme insight cards. And these things really help you by talking to the coaches. It doesn't then my own personal experience doesn't come much in play when I do coaching conversation. I talk more using the Gallup terminology and things which have been researched, which are really right. Yeah.
How do we get accused in the world we live in now? There's a million distractions. And, we're trying to work with people, and we have information coming on our phones and our computers via email. There's even some thought that we're not thinking deeply anymore. As I hear you talk, you seem like a deep thinker to me, like you're thinking through these things. How are you protecting yourself, or what kind of things do you do as a coach to kind of maybe help shut some of those things out? It's important. You got to listen, right? You got to take some of that input in. But how do you balance these constant inputs that are coming in versus spending time learning and thinking? And with high relator and high individualization, people are super important to you. So how are you balancing all that?
So thanks, Jim. Thanks for asking. And I'll share something more about my journey. I have, right from my childhood, I have been doing theater. And when you do theater, you have been trained in a way that a good actor is always a director's actor. And then I moved into learning and development space, and I was a master facilitator for a long time. I realized that a good facilitator, a good coach or good trainer, a trainer guides trainer, or a contents trainer. So first thing is very critical, that one has to master the content. One has to have very good understanding about the content. So I internalized everything, and that has been the mantra. I do nothing different, but my approach has been that I learn first, and before challenging anything, I try to understand it completely, and then I start challenging it, and I discovering more about it. And my number 2 theme, which is analytical, it drives me to know more about things, and allows me to do more research and then dig deep.
Yeah, as I hear you talk, as you were kind of you went through the steps a little bit earlier as you were talking about that, and it was like like we had a living kit there. You were working through, and so I do appreciate that approach. You think about enacting, and you have to. It's intense preparation. I did some of that myself in high school, and it was intense preparation to get ready for those things, and you had to kind of concentrate and practice it over and over again. What do you think the role of practice is for a coach? I mean, I think sometimes we think as a coach that we're going to get a bunch of information, we're just going to kind of wing it. Like, hey, we're just going to get together and we're going to have this conversation and it's going to be great. What do you think the role of practice is for a coach in making sure they have gone through the steps they need to go through before that coaching conversation or before that session they're going to give? What's that kind of role? What do you think?
So many times what happens, when we see clients, a lot of clients, when we meet them for the first time for a coaching conversation, we realize that they have gone through their report and they have also started concluding a lot of things. So if you look at from a coaching perspective, it's easy. Because the client has already done the job. So it actually sort of, you get tempted to quickly get into solutions because that the next steps are very clear to you now and to coachee also. That's something which is very, very dangerous. I try to avoid it. Because I know that the naming and claiming has not happened. The person has started aiming it. So the role of naming and aiming it is really, really critical. So I again, this is a checkpoint for me. Whenever that happens, I go back to naming and claiming it. I try to move them out of their the conclusions that they have made. And many times we have discovered that the conclusions they have made after just reading the report and after they are very different than when they experience the entire journey through coaching conversation, or when they discover more about their basements and balconies. Then their aim actually changes from what it was when we were ready for the first conversation.
I think that's an excellent point. And Jim, I think that's the beauty of what we do. I mean, winging it is so not an option simply because we may get really, really comfortable with the themes, but the way they pan out for everybody is so different. And unless you're, extremely cautious about the way you're listening for their reality and, you're conscientious about that, I don't think there is any way you can sort of help them in any way. So I think there is a absolute case for deep preparation before every coaching interaction.
Yeah, well, if from the 30 minutes we've been talking here with Abhishek, I get this feeling he has a very defined framework that he works with, right?
Yes.
And I think that framework gives us freedom. That's the flexibility when we go into these sessions. Abhishek, you said it yourself. You get there and you realize, we've gone right to application, and there's probably still some work to do. And application is great. Like that's the goal of performance, right? Is to get to that point where we're changing. But you recognize, hey, we should probably come back and listen a little bit more. And you recognize that because you have a coaching framework that you work within, right? You do the same things the same way each time, and it may not be exactly the same because every situation is different. But I gotta feel that you always come back to a very similar framework each time. Would that be true?
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens, I simply try to understand that why my coachee has hired me. And when I listen to them, I realize that they have hired me to improve certain output parameters, but the journey has to be through inputs. And my job is not to focus only on outputs. My job is to focus on the journey and make it really, really interesting and make it more application oriented for them. I may not be subject matter expert of their business. So when I go and start coaching people, I simply accept that in my first conversation that I don't know everything about your business. I may not know anything about this business, but what I know about my business. I know about strength-based development. How I can help you? I can help you make your inputs really, really interesting for you, so that you can apply them and gain more in your personal life, in your professional life, and get ROI. So that actually helps me. I simply try to. Many times they ask that, is it going to help me in increased productivity, or it is going to reduce attrition, or am I going to be more profitable? So my answer to them is, it's simply in your hands. My job is, better than I, how to increase profitability and productivity of your organization. But what I know, I can simply guide you. I can simply tell you about a framework which will help you, which will make your journey more interesting. And maybe you will discover a lot of things which you have not discovered in past in your life. And that will help you, your organization, your team members to achieve more, to drive more results and get ROI in the entire organization.
Do you think, though, that being an outsider in this, where you're not an industry expert, actually you have an advantage? Have you had that situation where you see things through a different lens because you are an outsider and you can bring a fresh perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah, always. This is like always. And many times where in situations where sponsor of coachee was someone else and I was coaching a coachee. So sponsor of coachee articulate a specific challenge. So in my first conversation, I realized that the coachee is not really opening up because he may not know that how I as a coach can help him discover a lot of things about his own work. But as we progress in our coaching journey, they discover that, my views, I'm giving an outside-in perspective, and my views are not colored. It always helps them when they realize that someone who's guiding them who doesn't have any biases in their mind and no specific agendas to drive. No specific business agendas to drive. That someone is trying to help them achieve more in their life.
I think that is the solutioning part of it. And even I think as consultants, before we add value in terms of solutioning, I think a great value that coaches add is helping in framing the problem. Sometimes it's impossible for a person to, extract themselves out of their own situations and frame a problem more dispassionately. And I think we as coaches are able to do that somewhat.
Yeah. So it's like, they don't know what they don't know.
Correct.
Yeah, we can often bring that. We can really bring that ray of sunshine or a big bright spotlight on problems because we can see those in different light. And I think we underplay that power sometimes. I think we, like you said, sometimes we begin to get too introspective when the problems are right out front. And they just need to be claimed at that point. And so, Pooja, as we kind of come in for a landing here, any final thoughts as we wrap this up?
No, I think it's been a great discussion, and thank you so much, Abhishek, for shedding light on some of those things around, technology and experiential learning and how things can be blended. Because I've always maintained that strengths journey cannot be in isolation. It's not a journey by itself. It has to be in light of whatever else is going on. And I think you've done that beautifully and given us another perspective of looking at the same thing. So thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to working with you later this year as well. So it'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jim. Thanks.
You bet. You're welcome. Thanks for saying you listen to Call to Coach. Appreciate that. That's always nice to hear that coaches are listening. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions or comments if you'd like to be a guest blogger. We have some space for that. If you like to write, send us those blogs, those ideas that you have. Put guest blogger in the subject line and send them to coaching@gallup.com. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program as well as all the past ones. We call those podcasts. They're available for you. Recapture that time in a plane, on a train, in a car, as you're traveling. Whatever you're doing, if you can get a pair of earbuds in, you can recapture that time and listen to these programs. All the links and all the instructions on how to get that done is available on our coaches blog. Just go to coaching.gallup.com. If you are interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, Pooja, do we have anything going on? Anything you want to highlight as we think about our courses that are coming up? Courses.gallup.com. Anything that you want to highlight before we go? No? Did you hear me, Pooja? Okay. We'll remind you that a list of all our courses that lead to certification, they're available on our courses site, courses.gallup.com. And the links are there right on the live page. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you'd share it. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We'll look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.